Hello, sir. Sorry for the delay. Good evening, everyone. I would first like to welcome Ravi Gupta, sir, on behalf of the YIMF family, who has joined us for the webinar on the platform of YIMF Academia Leadership. This is Dhanya S. Krishnan, and I will be your moderator for today. Young Ignited Minds Foundation aims to make our country legally empowered to combat all evils which haunt our nation even after 73 years of independence. With an aim to provide justice socially and economically, we extend our support to the citizens and help them in catering to their basic needs. In furtherance of our objective and under the guidance of our chairman and founder, Mr. Ishan Bansal, and CEO and MD, Ms. Priyam Jingar, we have started a series of webinars by our esteemed professors, activists, lawyers, and professionals from other fields. Thank you, sir, for taking the time out of your busy schedule and for joining us today. Before proceeding with the webinar, I would like to state the guidelines and the code of conduct that the participants are expected to adhere to. The participants will have to keep their mic and video turned off throughout the webinar. The webinar shall be divided into two sessions. The first session is exclusively for the speaker to deliver his lecture, and the second session is the question and answer session. Participants are not allowed to turn on their video or audio throughout the webinar. Participants can ask questions only in the question and answer session or when sir asks them to. Questions are to be asked only through the chat box, and everyone is asked to remain muted. Participants creating any kind of nuisance will be removed from the webinar. Please maintain seriousness during the webinar and make the most of this opportunity. I am very delighted to introduce our speaker for today, Mr. Ravi B. Gupta. He is a practicing chartered accountant with an experience of more than 25 years. His core areas of practice include formation and taxation of charitable trusts, companies, and NGOs, and matters related to direct taxes. Now I would like to request sir to take over the session and proceed further. Thank you, sir. Sir, I would request you to turn on your mic. Thank you, sir.
I'm audible now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So at the very outset, I would like to thank the foundation, basically Young Ignited Minds. The name itself is very attractive, Young Ignited Minds. So it gives a very good feeling. And especially talking to professionals is always a pleasure. And as far as the audience goes, we have got, I can see some of the participants who are my friends. One of them is my partner also, chartered accountants, advocates. So I'm very happy to address this elite set of participants today. So taking not much time because the session is very important rather than talking about other things. So I would start the session. Basically, I will display the PPT. You will all be in a position to see the PPT, the PowerPoint presentation, and I will as the session goes on, I will take you through the sections, and of course the question answer session, as Dhanya said, will be in the end for say 10-15 minutes. I would not mind if the question answer session is kept for more than 10-15 minutes also, but I will try to finish it within say like 1 hour or so, and then we can have the question answer session, and maybe it will be extend for another 10 minutes because the subject is very vast. I have tried to compress it so that I can deliver the maximum and give you the give you very important or very relevant material. Okay, so I will display my PPT now and I will start the session. Dhanya, can you see the PPT?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this is basically what we are dealing with today: formation and taxation of charitable trusts, institutions, and a slide, if the time permits, overview about FCRA, Foreign Contribution Regulation Act. So these are the contents which I am going to deal with today. That I have already said. I will be dealing with 12AB now. One section has been introduced by the Finance Act 2020, whereby the entire process of registration under Section 12A has changed. Now that is why it is called a fresh registration. Earlier the section was 12AA and now it is 12AB. Otherwise I am dealing with Section 11 to 13. I will touch upon Section 80G. I will touch upon accredited income. I will touch upon anonymous donation also, and finally Foreign Contribution Regulation Act if the time so permits. So basically formation of trust, institution and company. So now basically as far as formation is concerned, we can form a charitable trust institution under, as far as Maharashtra is concerned, in Maharashtra under Maharashtra Public Trust Act 1950 or Societies Registration Act 1860. Now Societies Registration Act 1860 is a central law basically, and Maharashtra Public Trust Act, as the name suggests, pertains only to the state of Maharashtra. And more or less Maharashtra Public Trust Act, Gujarat Public Trust Act is same as Maharashtra Public Trust Act also. For all practical purposes, people dealing in Gujarat, practicing in Gujarat and Maharashtra can rest assured that there is not much difference as far as this act is, this state act is concerned. So Society Registration Act, Maharashtra Public Trust Act as far as Maharashtra is concerned, and finally you can form a company under Section 8 of the Companies Act 2013. Earlier this section was Section 25 and the Act of Companies Act was called the Companies Act 1956. Now after Companies Act 2013 was introduced, the section has changed to Section 8 company. Now as far as formation goes, under the Maharashtra Public Trust Act and the Society Registration Act, for both these acts, the regulatory body is the Charity Commissioner. I am more specifically talking about Maharashtra now, because we are practicing in Maharashtra and you will all be looking for some clients in Maharashtra, mostly I believe. And the different states have got different local acts as far as the Trust Act is concerned. So basically what we are doing is Maharashtra Public Trust Act. Now the broad idea, the broad guidelines which I would like to see, many a times people are confused why these two acts for registration. So one act is Maharashtra Public Trust Act 1950, wherein the minimum number of trustees required is 2. The basic difference, I am just talking about the basic difference, then we can, if somebody has some specific queries, we will deal with the queries at the end of the session. And Society Registration Act, you need to have minimum 7 members. So that is a major difference, you know. In Maharashtra Public Trust Act, there is a settler, whereas in Society Registration Act, we do not have a settler. There is a common set, people with common set of goals, they come together, the minimum number should be 7, and they can form a society and register the society under the Society Registration Act. And one more thing which I would like to bring to your kind notice is, once you register under Societies Registration Act, the registration under Maharashtra Public Trust Act 1950 comes by default. Because for all practical purposes, you will need the Maharashtra Public Trust Act 1950 registration number. For example, submitting the accounts and for all other change reports, etc., you will need the Maharashtra Public Trust Act 1950 number. So once you, in other words, if you register under Society Registration Act, you will get the certificate of Maharashtra Public Trust Act 1950 also by default. So now this is about formation, and there are many facets to formation. I can deal those particular things as far as in the question answer session. Now coming to Income Tax Act. Now first thing is, first of all, most of the people you will be facing queries why to form a charitable trust. Now, why to form a charitable trust, that I will come when we are talking about Section 12A. What are the advantages of forming a charitable trust, and what are the advantages of getting registrations under the various income tax sections? So that will come when we are talking about Section 12A and 80G. So now primarily I talked about the formation of the trust, and now when we are coming to the Income Tax Act, Section 215 is very important. Now, what does Section 215 say? 215 defines charitable purpose. Now, charitable purpose, there are total 7 limbs. as far as the definition of charitable purpose goes. Now, of course, I would like to draw your kind attention to the fact that the charitable purpose definition is an inclusive definition. Earlier, there were only 4 limbs. Then they were increased to like 6 limbs, I believe. 6 limbs, yes. And then finally, yoga was added in the year 2015. So that is how we have got 7 limbs as far as the definition of charitable purpose goes. So you can see the charitable purpose areas which are called charitable purpose. So we will move ahead. Now the important point is the definition of charitable purpose is an inclusive definition that we have already said. All the limbs of section 215 are not mutually exclusive. They may overlap. For example, I would like to say that suppose if you are sponsoring a school fees, if you are paying a school fees of a needy person, so that may fall under relief of the poor also, and that may also fall under promotion of education also. So that is why we say that the charitable purpose definition is mutually exclusive. It is not mutually exclusive. One important case law which is very important I would like to bring to your notice: a purpose must, in order to be charitable, be directed to the benefit of the community or a section of the community, as distinguished from an individual or a group of individuals. This was decided way back in 1983, and the entire charitable purpose rotates around such judicial precedences. So what does this mean? Actually, the benefit should it should not benefit the whole of mankind. You may say that if you have a charitable trust, and that charitable trust should benefit the whole of mankind. So that is not possible, because you may be serving a particular section of people also. So that will not make the purpose of the trust non-charitable. The other thing is not necessary to provide free services. Many a times there is a misconception that if it is a charitable trust, you should not charge anything. That is again a misconception, because if you are running an educational institute, you will definitely have to charge some fees from the students so that you can run the organization. So it is not necessary that you are providing free services. Always the primary test to see is there is always an uncertain fluctuating body of beneficiaries. Always. So that is the primary test that you have to do, that who are the beneficiaries. If the beneficiaries are a fluctuating body and you are providing charitable services falling under the 7 limbs which have been defined above, it is fine. It is okay. You can go ahead. Subject to, of course, the other conditions and other sections of the Act. Next, now very important, in section 215, a proviso was introduced in the year 2008. Of course, 2008-9 is no more relevant now. 9-10 is also no more relevant. I would talk about 12-13 to 15-16. Now the limit of 25 lakhs was set. What is this limit for? Suppose if you are running a charitable organization, and to fund the charitable organization, you need funds. And if you are running a commercial activity in the sense, you are doing some trading, or you are doing some profit activity, which you may call for, if you are doing something for profit, like for example, if you are running an educational institute is covered under the first 6 limbs. So there this particular limit is not applicable. But suppose if you are running a charitable for other, it is falling under other general public utility purposes. In that case, you are running some other business activity to fund the charity or to fund the objects of the trust. In that case, the limit is set that you cannot do any commercial business or any commercial activity. 20%, the limit set is 20% of the total receipts of the relevant financial year. Now, for example, the total receipts in a particular year is say 1 lakh. Then in that case, the commercial activity, the amount generated from the commercial activity should not be more than 20,000. Otherwise, it will not be treated as a charitable purpose, and you will not get the benefits of section 11, 12, the exemption section basically. Of course, there is no clarity whether the total receipt shall also include the business receipts or corpus donation. But in our opinion, the business receipts should also be included, and corpus donation should also be included, because corpus donations for all practical purposes will be treated as income. But of course, it is exempt under section 11(1)(d) that I am covering later on. And as I have said above, the above restriction does not apply for the first 6 limbs. What does this mean? Suppose if you are running an educational institute and if you are doing a business activity, in that case, the limit of 20% of the total receipt is not applicable. Only in the case of the residual limb, which is the 7th limb, this limit is applicable. So section 12A. Now coming to section 12A, this is one of the most important reasons why you form a charitable trust. You form a charitable trust when you get your charitable organization registered under section 12A, so that you get the exemptions available under the Income Tax Act. So now 12A, what are the conditions for 12A? Application has to be made to the PCIT or CIT in the prescribed form. Of course, Ishan has gone through this entire process when we were dealing with YIMF, because I was actively involved as far as 12A and ATG registrations were concerned. So Ishan is also very well aware of the process. But let me run through the entire process so that everybody comes to know a basic idea everybody will get. You know, application for registration is to be made in the prescribed form. And now this 1/6/2007, 31st May 2007, there was a change. There was a change. Earlier, the registration could be given from with retrospective effect. From 1/6/2007, the retrospective effect of the registration was stopped. Again, the Finance Act 2014 came into picture. Again, the retrospective effect came into being. Again, the trust, the 12A registration is nowadays given with retrospective effect. And now 12AB has come. So there have been a lot of changes as far as 12A, 12AA, 12AB is concerned. Okay, so I have cited a few case laws where retrospective effect of registration under section 12A was granted. Now fresh application. There is one more amendment which has come very recently, that suppose if you are modifying the objects of the trust, which are not in consonance with the conditions levied at the time of giving 12A registration, in that case you have to apply for the 12A registration afresh. The old registration will become ineffective. The principal CIT or the CIT will have the power to cancel the registration if the objects are modified and not applied for a fresh registration within a period of 30 days. Now this new section 12A1AC has been introduced by the Finance Act 2020. Now the entire process of registration has changed. You have to apply fresh. The dates are given when you have to apply. Now this particular amendment had come into effect from 1/6/2020, but due to this pandemic, of course, the dates have extended. Now the date is from 1st October 2020 for the next 3 months. That means what does this date imply? This date implies that 12AA registration, the section 12AA will become ineffective and 12AB will be replaced in place of 12AA. So now, for existing charitable trusts which are registered under section 12A, they will have to apply fresh from 1st October 2020. Of course, the first 5 years registration will be given to them without much investigation. But at the after 5 years, when you are going for renewal, the entire objects, etc., and all the documents, etc., will be verified to see whether the objects are being carried out properly as laid down, as per the conditions laid down by the Income Tax Act. The time limits are given, within how much time you have to apply, within how much time the charity commissioner, the commissioner of income tax will have to give the registration. Now, from Finance Act 2020, by this latest amendment, a provisional registration has been introduced. That provisional registration will be given for a period of 3 years. And after that, suppose within a period of 6 months or within a period of 1 year, you have started with the activities, you can apply for the regular registration. But of course, after a period of 2.5 years, you will have to definitely apply for regular registration. Otherwise, the provisional registration will become ineffective and you will have to apply afresh. So these are the time limits given. Provisional registration, what is the reason for giving provisional registration? Now, earlier what used to happen is when you used to go for registration, practically we have dealt with many cases. When we used to go for registration, the charity the income tax people would say कि भाई आपका तो कोई ऑब्जेक्ट अभी तक शुरू नहीं हुआ है, आपको हम registration कैसे दे देवें? So that is why the provisional registration has been introduced. So once you get the provisional registration, you start with the activities. You can go with that provisional registration to the people who are willing to donate to your trust. And once you get the donation, you can start with the activities. And once you start with the activities, you can approach the income tax authorities to give you a regular registration. The date of audit has been changed. Earlier it was like September, now it has been changed to October. So these are the changes which I would like to. Of course, you can go through my entire PPT. I have made a very elaborate presentation, and of course, I will be touching upon the important areas, and then.
I'm really sorry to disturb you, sir, but your mic has been muted again. Yes, sir. Now we're ready.
No,
Sure.
Okay. So I'm audible now?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. So what I was saying is that I have made a very elaborate PPT. You can go through the PPT. I am covering all the points as far as possible. Just in case if you have some queries, you can always write to me. My email is provided to the entire team of IMF. So you can always access, and I will definitely reply to any queries which you have. So so let us move ahead now. Now, there are many issues which have cropped up during the process of income tax assessment when we see how the taxes have been levied. There are many misconceptions that the CPC, a lot of things which the CPC has misinterpreted or misunderstood. So that is why the SSC is facing a lot of problems as far as taxation of charitable trust is concerned. But of course, we have to handle all those queries. Now, this procedure was the 12AA procedure is just for a reference, but 12AA procedure will become ineffective from 1st of October. Now, earlier the date was 1st of June, which is extended to 1st of October. So 12AA will become ineffective, and in place of 12AA, 12AB has been replaced. And one or two things which I would like to, those people who wish to practice in this area. Now, if you are applying for a 12A registration, it is always possible that you can withdraw your 12A registration just in case if you so feel that you have lapsed on something, or the income tax officer says that this is the area which you have not covered. So in that case, you can always withdraw your application rather than the income tax department rejecting your application. Because once the income tax department rejects the application, then there are many reasons, क्यों reject हुआ, कैसे reject हुआ, what was the reason. So it is always better that you insist the income tax officer कि sir, these are the things which I have not completed. I have lapsed on all these areas. So I am withdrawing my application. I will make a fresh application. So that can always be done. And 12A even the religious trusts can obtain 12A because the Income Tax Act says charitable or religious purposes. But of course, if the trust is religious, you will have a challenge in obtaining Section 80G registration. So, and one more thing which I would like to draw the attention of the participants is many a times, they have queries, why there are two registrations. So 12A and 80G. Now 12A is for the institute to get exemption under income tax and subject to conditions, of course. And 80G is for the donor who donates the amount to the trust. So that means 12A is for the donee and 80G is for the donor. So this is 12AA I have just written down for your reference. But of course, 12AA, the ultimate section, subsection 5 says nothing contained in this section shall apply on or after the first day of October 2020. Of course, in 12AB, everything else, the relevant points in 12AA have been incorporated in the new section 12AB. So this is 12AB. Now 12AB, more or less, I have covered that the registration will be granted for a period of 5 years. Initial registration will be granted. And now, what is the reason behind doing this 12AB? I would like all of you to travel through this. Why 12AB has been introduced? Because there was a practical difficulty. Suppose if I am a donor and I have to verify the credentials of the trust, I had no source of verifying the credentials of the trust. whether the trust is validly registered under section 12A, whether the registration has not been withdrawn. I don't know how to make sure. Even the income tax department were not in a position to access the data at times so that they can give proper deductions to the donors. And ultimately, there were many unscrupulous practices going on. So that is why this 12AB has come into scene and the 5-year registration has come into scene, so that, if there is any problem with the trust, if they are not carrying on the activities, if they are not following the conditions laid down in the Income Tax Act, in that case, the registration will not be renewed. So that is the whole idea of incorporating this 12AB section. So the time limits are given within how much time the income tax department has to issue a 12A registration. Now, in the case, if it is a case of renewal, then 6 months is the time limit given. In the case of existing charitable trusts who are applying for renewal now, at present, like in the 1st of October, now within 3 months you will be granted the fresh certificate. And in the case of provisional registration, the time given is 1 month. 1 month from the date, 1 month from the end of the month in which the application is made, you will get your provisional registration. Now there are various sections, various areas where if you default, the PCIT or the CIT, as the case may be, can withdraw the registration of section 12A. Of course, a reasonable opportunity of being heard will be always given to all the charitable trusts. Now, after registering under section 12A, as prescribed, as per the procedure prescribed under section 12AA or 12AB, you will get the deductions prescribed or exemptions prescribed under section 11.1. Now, briefly, what does 11.1 say? 11.1 talks about wholly charitable, the section, subsection A talks about wholly charitable or trust established for wholly charitable or religious purpose. Subsection B talks about partly. Now, this partly issue was before the enactment of this act. So now, for all practical purposes, trusts formed only for charitable or religious purposes will be recognized for the section of 11. So for the purpose of section 11.1, partly charitable or religious trusts will not be recognized for section 11.1, or you will not get a registration under section 12A. To put it in other words, you will not get registration under section 12A if your trust is formed for partly religious or charitable purposes. That means 50%, suppose if you are having a business activity, 50% and 50% is charitable purpose, that is not allowed nowadays. Now, coming to one more thing, why you register under section 12A, what is the benefit which you get? The benefit is prescribed under section 11.1. The first and foremost benefit is you can accumulate 15%, not more than 15% of your receipts indefinitely. So that is a sort of standard deduction which you are getting. But of course, in other words, you have to apply 85% of whatever you have received. 85% of whatever you have received. Suppose if you have applied 90%, you can carry over 10% for unlimited period. If you have applied say 95%, you can carry over 5% for accumulate 5% for unlimited period. So that is the biggest advantage, that you can apply 85% and 15% can be accumulated indefinitely for the expansion of the trust or for meeting the objects of the trust in the future. Now 11.1c talks about the application of funds toward international welfare activities, basically applying the funds outside of India. It is allowed but subject to condition. The conditions are that the trust happens to be created before 1/4/1952, which is a very rare circumstance nowadays, or it is engaged in promotion of international welfare in which India is interested, or the CBDT by special or general or special order has granted the exemption for carrying out such activity. I would recommend that in your constitutional document, you should always cover international activities, scope for doing international activity, because 11.1c prescribes that. Otherwise, it becomes difficult to change the constitutional document later on. And the clause number D is corpus donations. All corpus donations which are capital receipts are exempt as per section 11.1. This is a very big advantage. You can receive corpus donations if you have got a future project, very big project. Suppose if you want to come up with a school or a hospital or a other mega institute or something, in that case, you can always receive corpus donations, and those corpus donations can be applied for the purposes for which the amount has been accumulated. the donor can give the amount with a specific direction that this fund should form part of the corpus fund, or he may be more specific by saying that this fund should form part of the corpus fund and should be utilized for so and so purpose. That is also possible. You can set aside that fund for that particular objective. The other conditions are like trust is registered with the commissioner under section 12A, which we have already discussed, and books of accounts are audited under section 12A1B. 12A1B. Now, what is the criteria for audit? The criteria for audit is if the receipts are more than the minimum amount which is exempt under income tax. In the present circumstance, it is 2,50,000. If the income of your trust is more than 2,50,000 in a particular year, then you have to get the accounts of the audit of the trust audited, and the audit report has to be submitted in a form 10B. Just a minute. Now, there are certain explanations to section 11(1)(a) and 1B. Now, this is another very important point why you should register under section 12A. Under these explanations, the most important thing is you can read through the text for a better understanding, but I will give you a practical example. Suppose if you are receiving a certain amount of donation on 31st of March. Now, you won't be in a position to apply that amount because you have received the amount on the last date. In that case, the income tax department has provided that this explanation relates to that particular situation. You know, what you can do is in form 9A, you can write to the income tax department saying, I want to carry over this amount to the next financial year. In other words, I will apply this amount which is received on the last day of the financial year in the next financial year. So that particular amount you can reduce from your total receipts. It will be deemed to be applied. So that is one big advantage which section 11(1) has given. And there is one more case whereby if an income is accrued in a particular financial year but not received, that amount also you can write to the income tax officer in the form prescribed form 9A, and you can tell them that this is the amount which I have booked in this financial year, but it will be received in the subsequent year or in the subsequent years. So I will apply that amount in that particular year or in the next financial year in which the amount is received. So that is also allowed, that amount also can be carried over, accumulated in the next financial year or as the case may be in the year of receipt. So this is also a very big advantage. Now practically if I tell you, suppose if you are during the financial year, if you have received say 1 crore. So as per whatever I have explained now, you are supposed to apply 85 lakhs. If you don't happen to apply 85 lakhs, and suppose if the 5 lakhs out of the entire amount, 5 lakhs is received on 31st of March of the financial year. In that case, the application will fall short of 5 lakhs and you will have to pay tax on that 5 lakhs. But by filing form number 9A, you can save the tax on rupees 5 lakhs and you can tell the income tax officer that this is the amount I will be utilizing for the next financial year. So this is also a very big advantage as far as the registration under section 12A goes. Now explanation 2. Okay. From financial year 17-18 onward, this is a very important explanation which has been introduced by section 11(1). There was a lot of round tripping of funds happening. Suppose if you have 5 NGOs, so what you were doing is whatever the amount is applied, it is okay. If you fall short in the application, you donate that amount in the form of corpus to other charitable trusts. So there was a lot of round tripping happening. The funds were not actually applied for the purpose for which the trust is formed. So that is why this loophole was plugged from the financial year 17-18, and now corpus donation from one charitable trust to another charitable trust is no more recognized as an application of funds. Now, this amendment has no impact as far as corpus donation is given out of accumulated funds is concerned. The income tax department is concerned only with the amount which is received in a particular financial year. If you have accumulated amounts, accumulated say by operation of section 11(1) or accumulated by corpus donation, that amount can be donated. But during the year, the amount which has to be used for charitable purpose, that should not be disturbed. So that is why this particular explanation has been introduced. The explanation 3 talks about, if you are not deducting tax, 30% of the expenditure will be disallowed. If you are paying more than 10,000 in cash, the particular payment will be disallowed. So that is how it is. Now, section 11(1)(a) talks about capital gain. Now capital gain, as far as practically we have come across a lot of situations when one more point which I would like to bring to your notice is even the capital asset purchase can be debited to the income and expenditure account. That also can be treated as application. So according to me, 11(1)(a) has got not much operation, because if you are debiting the capital expenditure, whenever you sell that particular asset, if you are receiving that amount, you can jolly well credit in the income and expenditure account and apply towards the objects of the trust. So according to me, capital gain situations will be very limited, and if they so arise, that can be dealt with on a case-to-case basis. Section 11(1)(b) again talks about consequences of non-application of income after the options which you have exercised by filing form number 9(a). If you don't after exercising that option, if you don't use that money as prescribed by the explanation, in that case the amount will become taxable. Section 11(2) talks about, this is another major advantage which section 11(1) gives. Section 11(1) gives. That is 11(2), section 11(2). Now, what is the advantage in this particular section? Suppose if you are having a project to be executed, say 3 or 4 or 5 years later on. Suppose, let me give you a practical example. If you are coming up with a school building and you need, say, 1 crore rupees. So 20 lakhs can be accumulated over a period of 5 years. You cannot have all the money with you at the same time, but you can accumulate it over a period of 5 years. So 11(2) gives you that advantage. You can accumulate that donation for that specific purpose for a period of 5 years, and it can be applied at the end of the 5 years. And it will be deemed application. But of course, this particular amount so accumulated has to be deposited as per the areas specified in section 11(5), which I am covering later. There are certain conditions which under the section 11(2) you have to meet with. You have to file form number 10 before the due date for filing return, and all those things are there that you can go through with the PPT. Section 11(3), exemption of section 11(2) withdrawn if specific conditions not satisfied. Now, if you are not meeting the conditions, the exemption will be withdrawn. Now, the conditions are given. The amount is applied to all purposes other than for the purpose for which it is accumulated, very rightly so. Ceases to remain invested in section 11(5), is not utilized for the purpose for which it is so accumulated. 5 years mein agar aapne utilize nahi kiya, then that amount will become taxable. And if it is donated to other charitable trusts, donation to other charitable trusts out of 11(2) accumulated funds is not allowed. Now, section 11(3)(a), modification of objects. Many a times, it becomes difficult. It becomes difficult to apply the amount accumulated under section 11(2) because of some various circumstances, unavoidable circumstances. So this particular section gives you a margin. You can write to the income tax officer, explain to him the practical difficulty, why you are not in a position to use that particular amount for the particular purpose for which it has been accumulated. The income tax officer, after listening to you, after hearing to you, he might grant you permission so that the funds can be utilized for some other purpose. Of course, those objects and those purposes are to be covered are as per the objects of the trust, other objects of the trust as mentioned in your constitutional document. So those conditions have to be met. 11(4)(4)(a) talks about business undertaking. Business undertaking can also be a property of the. Now 11(1) says property held under trust. So property means business undertaking also. Property only does not mean movable or immovable property. It can also be a business undertaking. It can also be a goodwill of the firm by which you accumulate funds, by which you get donation. So 4 and 4A, business undertaking can also be a part of the charitable can be treated as property of the charitable trust. Now, section 11(5) talks about the specified modes for investing funds of the trust. So that is a very detailed list I have not mentioned here. You can access from the income tax website, that you can get the details from there. Now, very recently, this 11(6) has been introduced. Now, depreciation will not be considered as application of income if the asset on which depreciation has been charged has already been considered as a part of application of income earlier. Very rightly so. If you are debiting the entire amount of the asset which you have purchased to your income and expenditure account, you should not get depreciation. Otherwise, it is a double deduction. It may lead to unnecessary cash generation in the charitable trust, which can be misused for purposes other than for which the objects of the trust, basically. And 11.7, now earlier this 11.7 is amended by the Finance Act 2020. Earlier, you were in a position to claim deduction under Section 10 also and Section 11 and 12 also. Now that has been stopped. Now you can either claim deduction under Section 1023C or you can claim deduction under Section 11. So basically here it is the end of 11.7 basically. So Section 12. Section 12 says that voluntary contribution. There are two types of income which your trust will receive. One is income from the property held under trust and one is voluntary contribution. So voluntary contribution is dealt by Section 12. So that income will be included for all practical purposes. That will be available. In other words, it will be available for application towards the objects of the trust. And value of the services provided to interested specified persons, which is defined in Section 13.3, that will also be included as income. So these are the two things which have been defined as income. There is one more subsection to this, subsection 3, but that is no more relevant because that is dealing with the relief of Gujarat earthquake people in the year 2000, 2001, 2002. So that is no more relevant. So that is why I have not mentioned. Now 13.1. 13.1 talks about denial, withdrawal or exemption. You will not get the exemption under Section 11 and 12 if so and so reasons. Income applied for private religious purpose and not for public at large. Income of charitable applied for benefit of particular religious community. Now, of course, there is an exception to this. The exception being, if the trust is formed for scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, backward classes, or women and children, in that case, it will not be treated as the income applied for particular religious community or caste. Income applied for benefit of specified persons. You cannot apply the income for the benefit of specified persons. Of course, you can give reasonable remuneration under Section 13.1c, read with Section 13.2c. Now, let me give you a practical example. Suppose if a doctor is having a charitable trust, he is running the hospital and he is working for the hospital. He is doing all the necessary professional work which he would have otherwise been doing in his private practice. Then in that case, if some remuneration is paid to the doctor, provided the remuneration is reasonable, will be allowed and will be treated as application of funds towards the objects of the trust. Funds invested or deposited otherwise in any other form specified in Section 11.5, which I mentioned above. 13.2. Situations where the income or the property of the trust or institution or any other part of such income or property shall be deemed to have been used for the benefit of person referred to in Section 13.3. Now 13.3 talks about defines the specified persons and 13.2 says if the income is applied, there are various methods mentioned in what will be treated as application of funds for the benefit of specified persons. I have not listed all those things that is available from that can always be jotted down and gone through. 13.3 specified persons defined, that also I have not written in detail, that can always be accessed. Now 13.4. So 13.2h says investment in 13.2h deals with investment in an organization in which the specified person has got major interest, So 13.4 is an exception to that. Exemption shall not be denied if the investment of the trust or institution in a concern in which the specified person has a substantial interest, provided such investment is not more than 5% of capital of that concern. In other words, if you have invested in an organization in which the specified person has got substantial interest, but that investment is only 5% or less than 5% of the entire capital of the firm, in that case, it will not be treated as misapplication of funds. Section 13.5 is no more relevant. It talks about 1992, way back in 1992. Section 13.6 provides that a charitable or religious trust running an educational, again, 12.2 and 13.6 have to be read together. Now 13.7 talks about anonymous donation. Now this is an area which most of the people are concerned with. Section 13.7 talks about anonymous donation which are taxed as prescribed in Section 115 BBC. Now what 115 BBC says, anonymous donations to be taxed in certain cases. tax payable will be aggregate of. Now 30% flat rate is prescribed on anonymous donations. Of course, a relief is given. What relief is given? Higher of these amounts will not be treated as anonymous donation. 5% of the total donations received by the SSC or 1 lakh rupees, whichever is higher, will be reduced from the entire amount of anonymous donation. And ultimately that amount will be added to the remaining income. Tax will be calculated accordingly as per the provision of section 11, 12 and 13, because the excess part of the anonymous donation will be taxed at 30% maximum marginal rate. Now subsection 2 gives you exceptions. Anonymous donation to a wholly religious trust is not taxed at MMR. It is not treated as anonymous donation in fact. So a trust formed for a religious purpose can receive anonymous donation. That is what I mean to say. Then there are certain trusts which the purpose whereby is charitable also and religious also. In that case, if the amount is received for religious purposes, it will not be taxed, and the remaining amount which has come with a specific direction, say for example for an educational institute or a medical institute, in that case it will be taxed as per the limits prescribed above. Anonymous donation has been defined in subsection 3, so that is just a definition. And now section 13.8. Now 13.8 has to be read with 215 and the proviso to 215, which we have discussed very early. Nothing contained in section 11 and 12 shall operate if the provisions of the first proviso to section 215 becomes applicable. That means if you are doing business activity and you are crossing the threshold limit, in that case 13.8 comes into play and the exemption will be denied under section 11 and 12. But mind well, that exemption will be denied only for that specific financial year in which there is a violation. The 12A will not be denied for the entire organization for henceforth always. Now it is not a perpetual withdrawal of 12A. The effect of 12A will not be given for only for that particular financial year in which the threshold limit of turnover has exceeded. Section 39 recently introduced from the assessment year 16-17, whereby if you want to take the advantage of 11.2, for that matter 11.1 also, explanation to 11.1 also, if you want to take the advantage of accumulation, in that case you have to file the returns and the forms before the due date prescribed under section 139.1. So this brings me to the end of section 13. And now ATG. ATG is a very well-known section among each and every people. Now section ATG says that you will get deductions from the donations made from certain organizations which have been defined in subsection 1 and subsection 2. Now in some organizations you get 100% donations, like Prime Minister National Relief Fund, you get 100% donation, 100% deduction, sorry. And in other organizations, you get 50% deduction. Of course, subject to gross qualifying amount, which is mentioned in subsection 4. Subsection 3 has been omitted. Section 4 talks about the gross qualifying amount. So let me give you a practical example. Suppose if a person is having an income of 1 crore rupees, then he can donate up to 10 lakhs. Now 10% of the gross qualifying amount. That is, he can donate 10 lakhs, and if he is making a donation or giving a donation to a trust, which can give you only 50% deduction. So in that case, if you are donating 10 lakhs, 5 lakhs will be reduced from the income. So 50% of the gross qualifying amount. Now subsection 5 specifically talks about charitable trusts which are registered under section 12A, thereby getting the benefits of section 11-12, or the organization registered under section 1023C. And then subsection 5 talks about those organizations. The instrument under which the institution or fund is constituted does not contain any provision for transfer or application of income for purpose other than charitable purpose. Okay, again, same old conditions, particular religious community. The institution or fund maintains regular accounts. Okay, the institution or fund is duly established or registered under the respective acts. That is, the respective acts means Maharashtra Public Trust Act, Society Registration Act, or Section 8 company as far as we are concerned now. Subsection 5A. Deductions so allowed under this section shall not qualify for deduction under any other provision of this Act. Of course, you cannot get a double deduction. The provision of this section shall apply only to institution or fund if the expenditure on religious purpose does not exceed 5% of its income. Now, the meaning of this particular thing is ki if you are, we have seen in our practical experience that when we are going for a ATG registration, and suppose if the trust is say 1 or 2 years old, we have got 1 or 2 balance sheets, and the balance sheets, the application of funds, in the application of funds, if the application towards religious purposes is more than 5%, in that case ATG is denied to us. So that is what subsection 5B talks about. Subsection 5C, again, relief to the victims of earthquake in Gujarat, way back in 2000, 2001, 2002. That is no more relevant now. Subsection 5D. 5D says any donation above 2,000 rupees in cash, if made, will not qualify for deduction under section 8IG. That many a times, you know, you will face a practical question. Suppose if the trust is receiving say 10,000 rupees in cash, the trust can receive donation 10,000 rupees in cash. They can account for, they can say that we have received 10,000 in cash. But if the receipt is issued for an amount of rupees 10,000 in cash, the donor will get a deduction only to the extent of rupees 2,000, and the remaining 8,000 he will not get deduction under section 8IG. So that is what subsection 5D means. Our explanation 2 to 5 are given. These explanations are self-explanatory. The deduction shall not be disallowed. Now, suppose if you are making a donation to a trust and the trust is denied deduction due to the operations of various sections, in that case, it will not so happen that the donor will not get the deduction, because it is the donor trust which has defaulted, not the donor. And he doesn't know the operations of the trust. What has gone wrong? For him, the ATG certificate is more than enough. He should receive a valid ATG certificate and he can jolly well donate to the trust and get the deduction. Charitable purpose does not include religious purpose for the purpose of section 8IG. Association or institution for promotion of games and sports as notified by the government shall be deemed to be an institution established for charitable purpose. Because why this has been introduced? Because this particular thing is not covered under earlier sections. You know? So that is why this explanation is given. Section 8EG not applicable to donations in kind. Section 8EG is applicable to donations in hard cash, hard money, not donations in kind. You cannot calculate donations in kind. That is why how do we calculate the deduction? So that is why this explanation has made it clear that any donation is kind, and any donation in kind will not qualify for ATG deduction. So this is ATG. Now coming to section 115 TD, I'll just explain what 115 TD, TF is. 115 TD has been recently introduced. Now this talks about tax on accreted income. Now what is tax on accreted income? There might be a situation whereby your trust is converted into any form not eligible for registration under section 12AA or 12AB. Suppose if you are converting the charitable trust to a say proprietorship concern or a private limited concern or whatever, so those concerns are not eligible for registration under section 12AA. So that one, this is one condition. And if you are merging your trust into an entity which is not eligible to be registered under section 12AA or 12AB, this is another condition. Third condition is if your trust is dissolved. If your trust is dissolved and you have failed to transfer the assets of the trust to another eligible trust in the sense which is registered under section 12AA or 12AB. These are the three situations whereby you will be taxed at a maximum marginal rate. Now, how will that accreted, the entire income of the trust will be treated as accreted income. How will that accreted income be calculated? That accreted income will be calculated as excess of fair market value of total assets less total liability. So that accreted income will be taxed at maximum marginal rate. Now this is a very draconian provision because I will tell you what are the issues in my, or what are the litigations which can come up as far as this section is concerned. My advocate professional friends who are into this type of practice, this is a very big opportunity for us as far as this accreted income is concerned. Now there are exceptions, of course, provided that so much of accreted income attributable to the following shall be excluded. Any asset acquired from agricultural income, because section 10(1) comes into play, and number 2 is any asset acquired after creation of trust till the registration of trust under section 12AA. In other words, if you have the benefit of 12AA or 12AB to a trust, from the time you are enjoying the benefit of 12AA or 12AB till the time your trust falls, the subsection 1 or 115 TD comes into play, till that time, whatever is the accreted income will be taxable. Before that, it will not be taxable. If you have not, in other words, if you have not availed the benefit of section 12AA or 12AB, accreted income, the tax on that income generated at that time will not be taxed. So that is the exception. Of course, I have written that just in case if anybody needs any more clarification, I can give. Now, these are the conditions where you can, it has been mentioned a trust or institution shall be deemed to have converted into any form not eligible for registration under section 12AA or 12AB if registration granted is cancelled. Now, we have already covered that in section 12AB4 and 12AA3 also, that if the registration is cancelled by the charity commissioner due to the reasons mentioned there, in that case, this particular 115 TD will come into play. You have modified the objects of the trust which are not in consonance with the conditions at the time of registration. So in that case also, accreted income will come into play. Now, subsection 4 says even if no tax is payable on regular income. Now, what is regular income? Now, in a particular financial year, you might have to pay tax on accreted income, as well as you might have done some activities. By those activities, you have generated some income on which tax has to be levied. So that tax also has to be paid, and the tax on accreted income has to be paid. Both the taxes have to be paid. So subsection 5, now principal officer. Now, these are the time limits when you have to pay the tax. When the tax is becoming payable within 14 days under various circumstances, when the cancellation is done or when it is modified. So this particular section is very, not of much relevance as far as explanation is concerned. You can just go through it and understand the time limits. If there is any issue as far as understanding of this particular subsection is concerned, you can get in touch with me. I'll explain it in detail. Rejection of fresh application, or there might be a situation where you, after modification, you may apply afresh, and the charity commissioner, the principal commissioner of income tax may reject the application if the modification is not proper. Subsection 6 says tax on accreted income will be the final payment of tax and no further credit shall be claimed by the trust institution. Subsection 7 says no deduction under any other provision of the tax shall be claimed. It's pretty clear. 1% interest will be levied if there is a delay in payment. And the principal officer of the trust will be treated as people in default if there is no payment. And suppose if in any case, there is one more case whereby you are transferring the assets to some other trust on dissolution. In that case, if the transferor is not in a position to pay the tax, if they are not paying the tax, the transferee can also be, the door of the transferee can also be knocked to recover the tax to the extent he has received the asset from the transferor. Now, the issues which may arise because of this is like, which I was earlier referring to. There will be a lot of litigations coming up because 115 TD proposes to tax assets, whereas the income tax mandates to tax income. So here, if you are proposing to tax assets, it is a violation of all the judicial precedences that have been held in the past. Now, it is a violation of Article 14 of the Constitution of India also, because institutions under section 1023C are not covered under section 115 TD. And one more point which I can think of is, suppose if you are paying taxes due to the if section 13 comes into play, or if you are paying taxes on 115 BBC, that is anonymous donation, and the amount is, the asset is accumulated out of those, or asset is purchased out of those funds which have, on which taxes have already been paid, you will be taxing them doubly. Again, there will be a double taxation under section 115 TD. You have already recovered tax under, say, for example, 115 BBC, and you are again taxing them on 115 TD. So these are the certain areas which may lead to a lot of litigations. So this is about accreted income. Finally, I am coming to the Foreign Contribution. I am just touching upon Foreign Contribution Regulation Act. Now, Foreign Contribution Regulation Act, what is a foreign contribution is defined, so that I am not going into those definition part. Uh, and now eligibility. Now this is a point of concern for most of us. Eligibility for registration under section FCRA. Now, what are the criteria? Number one, the trust should be registered, duly registered as per the Society Registration Act, Maharashtra Public Trust Act that we already discussed. It should be in existence for at least a period of 3 years. And has undertaken reasonable opportunity, the amount limit has been prescribed to 10 lakhs. You have to spend at least 10 lakhs in the last 3 years of your existence towards the objects of the trust. And a reasonable project has been prepared. Why do reasonable project in the sense you have to justify why you need the registration under section why you need the registration under FCRA, Foreign Contribution Regulation Act. Statement of income and expenditure should have been audited by chartered accountant for the last 3 years, which you are submitting. So these are the criteria which you have to meet so that you can apply for FCRA. And other important points, nowadays there have been a lot of changes in FCRA also. Now form number FC3 is applicable for registration, prior permission and renewal. Now once you submit the form number FC3, no rectification of error can be done. If there is some error, you have to file the form number FC3 afresh. Nowadays the application is made online. The date is also mentioned from 14th of December 2015. All the applications are made online. Payment of prescribed fees also has to be paid online. All FCRA registered entities have to upload their financial information on their website or the website provided by the central government, as the case may be. Now you have to open a designated FCRA account. If you want to go for a FCRA registration, a designated bank account has to be opened, and that has to be communicated at the time of registration. The details of the bank account has to be given along with in the form number FC3, which has been mentioned above. Now banks, what is the responsibility of the banks? Within 48 hours, bank has to report to the central government whatever transaction have taken place in foreign contribution in a particular account. Now, one more change has been made. If you are filing a nil return, if in a particular period you don't have any transaction as far as FCRA is concerned, in that case you need not submit the accounts. You have to just file a nil return. One more important point is no approval required for change in designated bank account. If you are changing the designated bank account, earlier prior approval was required. Nowadays no prior approval is required. You have to you can open a designated bank account and just intimate the central government that this is a new bank account which we have opened. Now gifts are not for a definite purpose. Gifts are not covered under FCRA. Only foreign contribution received for definite purpose are regulated. The gifts are not regulated under this act. It is advisable to take prior permission of amount in foreign a prior permission for a particular amount. It is always advantageous that you take permission in foreign currency because of the rate fluctuation. Suppose if you are taking permission for an amount of 10 lakhs and the donor transfers in foreign currency and the amount say if it falls short, it is okay. But if the amount exceeds 10 lakhs, then it will be a challenge. So it is better to take permission in foreign currency. So for example, if you might take a permission for say $10,000 or $20,000 as the case may be, or as any other foreign currency for that matter. Designated bank account for FCRA can be opened by using local funds, but the same should not be transferred back to the local account. Once transferred, okay, not a problem. Neither local funds should be deposited in designated bank account for purpose of foreign contribution, nor foreign contribution to be deposited in multiple bank accounts opened for purpose of utilization. Now, multiple bank accounts can be opened for utilization. Now, what is the reason for allowing multiple bank accounts? Suppose if the trust is functioning throughout India, for example, and you are having a designated bank account in Mumbai, and you have got some activities to be done in say Gujarat. In that case, you will need an account over there so that the amount can be transferred from the designated bank account to the account which is opened in Gujarat, so that and ultimately that amount can be utilized towards the objects of the trust. But transferring multiple bank accounts is not allowed. If there is an excess in that particular account in say Gujarat, the amount has to be transferred to the designated account again, and from the designated account, that amount can be transferred to some other multiple account where it is needed. For example, in some other state, for example. Okay, so Indian companies having more than, this is a major change. Indian companies having more than 50% share held by foreigners or foreign entities will not be treated as a foreign source. Earlier, it was treated as a foreign source. Contribution made by a citizen of India, very important. Contribution made by a citizen of India living in another country from his personal savings through normal banking channels is not treated as foreign contribution. So, you might face a query in many of the, for example, IMF, our trust is there. If you have a person, if somebody wants to donate and that person is an NRI having an Indian passport, he can donate to via IMF without any hassle. You need not have a FCRA registration to receive donations from that particular individual who is an Indian citizen. Section 3(1) defines the persons who cannot accept foreign contribution. For example, some media houses are there, some foreign, some judges, etc. Though these people cannot accept foreign contribution except without the permission of the central government. FCRA neither provides for any opportunity of being heard nor the reason. Suppose if you are not doing the activities, if the trust is involved, if the entity is involved into some unscrupulous practice, in that case, the FCRA registration may be suspended. Of course, you will be given an opportunity of being heard. Within a matter of 180 days, you have to prove your case. If you are in a position to prove your case, in that case, the FCRA registration, the suspension will be revoked, and the FCRA registration will be effective. Otherwise, the FCRA registration will be cancelled. So these are the basic important points as far as FCRA is concerned. So I think I have touched upon all the subjects and in the prescribed time given to me, I believe. So, Danya. Hello.
Thank you, sir. Hello.
Danya, we can have the question answer sessions now?
Yes, sir. So I think we can all agree that this was a very informative and enlightening and a very detailed session, sir.
Thank you very much.
I think move on to the question and answer session. So we request all the participants to drop in their question in the chat box, and I think sir will take time to answer each of the questions that you guys face. So sir, I think we already have our first question. It's from Pounduram. So he says an educational institution registered as AOP under the Society Act in about 15-20 years back has not applied under section 12AA and 12AB or 80G, and no IPR has been filed till date. Is there any way to apply now in 2020-2021, the financial year? If yes, what is the process for applying exemption under section 12AA or section 12AB for educational institution?
Okay. Now the trust is registered under Society Registration Act, right?
Yes, sir.
The trust is already registered 15 years.
But it was registered 15-20 years back.
15-20 years back. So nowadays, the first thing which any person who is having such an old trust, they have to first verify that whether the submissions to the Charity Commissioner Office has been done or not. Many a times we have seen such old trusts whereby they have not complied with the Charity Commissioner's requirement, and nowadays such old trusts which have not complied are being cancelled. So first of all, the person has to see whether the trust is still active. After that, the question of applying under section 12AA, nowadays 12AA is out of question, as I said. Now from 1st of October, rather than applying now, it is better that you apply under section 12AB from 1st of October, provided it is not extended again. So you can definitely apply if the provision, if the compliance as far as the Charity Commissioner is done, if the compliance as far as the Income Tax Department is done, you can definitely apply. Now, because income tax compliance is also important, because when you go for the registration, this is a fresh registration. When you go for the registration, they will ask for the income tax returns which you have filed. They will ask for at least 3 years income tax returns. So, you have to first ascertain whether the compliance as far as the Charity Commissioner as well as the Income Tax Department has been done. If all those compliances are done, that is the only time I would suggest that you should go for the 12AB registration. Otherwise, the application will be rejected, or you will not be in a position to comply with the documents which are to be submitted. at the time of application. So first of all, you have to see that all the compliances have been done. If all the compliances have been done under the respective acts, then you can go for the 12AB registration or 12AA registration, as the case may be.
Thank you, sir. So next question is by Anisha Gupta. So she wants to know if you can register for a trust online.
No, now registration for trust online. Nowadays, we have been doing a lot of registrations. The charity commissioner has got a website, but unfortunately, the registration, we have not been in a position to do the registrations online. The only institutions or the only facility to register your trust online is available under Section 8 of the Companies Act 2013. Section 8 companies under the Companies Act 2013 are registered online. Otherwise, registrations under Society Registration Act and Maharashtra Public Trust Act both have to be done manually.
Thank you, sir. Sir, you had talked about the various provisions that deal with the taxation of trusts, NGOs, and companies. So I would like to know what are some of the factors that come to light when you try differentiating how each of the trusts or NGOs and companies are taxed. Like, are there any key factors that you would like to point, which will be a point of difference of taxing each of these institutions, or
You mean taxing point of differentiation between a trust registered under Maharashtra Public Trust Act and the Companies Act?
Yeah.
That is what you meant to say. See, now, once you are registered under Section 12A, following the procedure prescribed under Section 12AA or 12AB, Section 11 and 12 and 13 comes into play. So once Section 11, 12 and 13 come into play, the taxation is uniform for all the entities. For example, I would say each and every, to be very precise, all the entities will be treated as individuals. You will get the basic exemption limit 2,50,000. Then the slab will be applicable. It will not be treated as a company or association of person whereby you have to levy a flat rate of tax or you have to levy a maximum marginal rate of tax. All the entities will be treated as individuals, and the taxes and the conditions applicable to individuals will be applicable to charitable institutes. So that is one of the major benefits why you register a trust under Section 12A.
Next, we have a question from CA Prashant Kadam. He wants to know if a trust is registered as a Section 8 company, is it necessary to get it registered with Charity Commissioner?
No, not at all. Not required. Not required. Once you have a Section 8 registration, you can go for your 12A registration as per the procedure prescribed under Section 12AA or 12AB, as the case may be. No separate registration under Charity Commissioner is required.
I think there are no. Yeah. Pandurang has another question. He wants to know if any family member transfer the fund to the account, if any of the family members transfer fund to the account of the member of a trust instead to the trust account, is that considered as a donation in the form of? I'm sorry, sir, just 1 second. Yeah. So he's asking if any family member who transfers the fund to the account of the member of trust instead of the trust account in the form of donation, how will it be treated? And this family member who's transferring the fund is considered to stay abroad. So will it fall under the exemption, and how will that donation be treated?
Please come again on the question.
Yes, sir. So, in case a family member who's staying abroad transfer a certain amount as donation to to the member's account instead of the trust's account, how will that donation be? Will it be treated? Will it get exemption, or how will it be treated since it is being donated to the member's account instead of the trust account?
No, as I told you in my FCRA, when I was covering FCRA, Now, if the person is a resident Indian, if he is having an Indian passport, he can transfer that amount directly to the trust. There is no question of transferring that amount to one of the members of the trust, and ultimately, if that member transfers the amount to the trust, that will be treated as a donation from the member to whom the amount has been transferred. So it is always better that if the person who is transferring, who is donating the amount, if he is an Indian citizen, having an Indian passport, he can transfer the amount directly to a charitable trust. He need not transfer the amount to the other member. And if it so happens, and that other member is transferring that amount to the charitable trust, in that case, the trust will treat him as a donor. The trust will not recognize the person who is transferring the amount from abroad. So my view is that first we have to check whether he is an Indian citizen. If he is an Indian citizen, he can jolly well transfer the amount to the charitable trust directly. He need not transfer to some other member, because why this is happening is, a lot of people are not aware that the Indian citizen can transfer the amount to the trust from abroad in foreign currency, even if the FCRA registration is not obtained by the trust. So even if in this present context, if the trust is not FCRA registered, and if the donor who is an Indian citizen holding an Indian passport is transferring an amount from abroad, maybe in foreign currency or maybe in Indian rupees, in that case it is jolly good. It is not a problem. He need not transfer to some other member.
So, but in case he's transferred to the member instead of, the account of the trust, will it be considered a donation because it's not transferred to the trust as such?
It will not be considered as donation because there are two separate transactions. One transaction is from the donor to the trust member over here. And that person, if he transfers the amount to the trust will recognize him as the donor. Now the trust is not coming into picture. It is a transaction between two individuals. So there is no question of exemption as such.
I think CA Prashant has another question. He wants to know if a particular trust whose registration is active with Charity Commissioner, but the trust has not filed financial statements and intends to file the same for last 3 to 5 years. What is the procedure? The trust is filing income tax returns regularly.
See, now, as far as the Charity Commissioner, the regulatory body is the Charity Commissioner, right? Charity Commissioner has not prescribed any limit whereby you cannot transfer accounts for so and so years. You can transfer for 5 years, you can submit the accounts for 5 years, 10 years, whatever. Otherwise, the Charity Commissioner, the Charity Commissioner has not said that you can furnish your accounts only for last year, as the Income Tax Act has said. In the case of Income Tax Act, you can submit the accounts only for 1 year. But if the accounts are not submitted for, say, 4 or 5 years with the Charity Commissioner, there is always a risk that the Charity Commissioner may cancel the registration also, under Section 22 of the Maharashtra Public Trust Act. So it is better to submit the accounts. You can submit the accounts. You can get the delay condoned by the Charity Commissioner. He might levy some minor penalty or some nominal penalty for late filing of the accounts. But it is always advisable you comply with the Charity Commissioner, you file the accounts with the Charity Commissioner for whatever number of years it is pending. And the Charity Commissioner accepts, not a problem.
Thank you, sir. The next question is by Sheetal. So the question is, if a trust is registered under the Society Act and is running an educational institution, but has not obtained any registration under Income Tax Act, then what are the tax implications and how will the income be treated? And can it claim Section 1023, Clause 23?
Yeah. Now this is a question touching upon various sections. But one thing is sure, that if you do not have a 12-way registration, the trust will then to be treated as an individual. There have been many case laws which have been decided. Children Education Society, Karnataka High Court has decided that a trust will be treated as an individual even if it does not have a 12-way registration. Now, as far as Section 1023C is concerned, now 1023C3D a limit of 1 crore is prescribed. If the turnover of the, or if the receipts of the educational institute is less than 1 crore, then the income of the educational institute will be exempt. Only if you cross that limit, you need a registration. You have to obtain a permission. But now the other question, the other question which comes up is whether what is the turnover of the trust. If it is below 1 crore, you can claim exemption under section 1023C 3AD. And if you do not have a 12-year registration, then too your trust will be treated as an individual. For example, if you have got X amount of receipt and if you have spent the X amount on the applications of the trust, the net amount which is there, it will be taxable, of course, subject to 1023C 3AD. If the educational institute is not falling under 1023C 3AD, in that case also it will be treated as an individual. But as far as the question of Sheetal is concerned, if she can give me more facts, she can get in touch with me. If she can give me a detailed, a particular, it has to be dealt on a case-to-case basis. If she can give me the figures, I can actually tell her what she can do and how she can save up on the taxes.
Sure, sir. So she just has a follow-up question regarding audit report in Form 10. So I think she will want some information about that with respect to a trust registered under the Societies Act.
Audit report under Form 10B.
Yeah.
Audit report under Form 10B is only applicable to trust registered under Section 12A. If your trust is not registered under Section 12A, audit report under Form 10B is not applicable.
Thank you, sir. I think that answers all the questions raised. And like you said, people can get in touch with you if they have any other queries, and you have provided them your email address as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I have shared my PPT also.
Yes.
I will share.
Yeah, circulated that. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I think with this, we'll be coming to the end of this webinar. So we will be sending all the participants a feedback form. Filling this form will enable us at YIMF to, conduct more such insightful sessions like, sir had conducted today. So I would once again like to extend our gratitude to sir for joining us today and delivering such an intriguing and a very thought-provoking lecture. We thank all the participants who joined us today, and we hope to see you all in more such webinars. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.